That's when we learned about it. December 7th, 1941. Yeah.
And how did you feel at the time, hearing about that?
Felt that we were dealt a good blow, and we have to respond to the war.
Now, were you drafted or did you enlist?
Well, I wrote a letter to enlist to all the services, and they all wrote back saying that be drafted. And when you're drafted, tell them about your aviation experience.
Oh.
And we'll put you in the Air Force, which I wanted to go in. And so I put the letter aside. I got drafted. And at the drafting, there were two gentlemen in brown uniform. And I thought they were both Army. And so I approached them, and I found out to my surprise, one was Navy and one was Marines. And so they decided which one should get me. After telling him a few lies like I couldn't swim, you know, this, that, and the other thing. Finally, the Navy said they would take me. So came July, I went to my draft board, got invited to go in, and so we went up to the Great Lakes Sampson Naval Training Center. There I spent 3 months learning how to march, taking orders, maybe shooting a rifle one day or so, and that was it. And so when I was interviewed there, I wanted to fly. And they said to me, "You're too big, you're too tall." I said, "It can't be, it's impossible." I hit somebody who, not knowing at the time, was on his way out. So he said to me, "Either you're a hospital corpsman or you become an electrician." And I said, "Fine, I'll be an electrician." So he said, "We'll send you to electrical school." So I said, "That's not too bad. If I can't fly, at least I can do something with aviation. I want to be an aviation electrician." So I went to Bainbridge, Maryland, after boot camp, and had an interview with the commander there of the electrical school and told him my experience, the training I had, and what I wanted to do. So he said to me, "See me after you graduate, or just before you graduate, and I'll have you transferred to aviation electrical school." And so as I graduated, he disappeared. He was transferred out. So there was no one to talk to. So I ended up being an electrician. And on my way, I went to Pier 92, did some cook, and there they wanted me to become a cook. But to my surprise, I learned I was assigned to USS Nevada, and that once you were assigned, you couldn't get off. So I said, "Fine, I'll go." So I traveled up to Boston from Pier 92 in New York, and after about a week there, I went aboard the Nevada. And then the ship, about 2 days later, sailed to New York. We had convoy duty. And on the way over, the Catholic chaplain called Kelly called me to on the ship. There were a lot of people. And Father Kelly, who was in charge of the Catholic on the ship, called me into his stateroom. And asked me, what should he say in case of a boy of a Jewish descent passes away? So I took out the books I had and I showed him. We got to be very friendly. And as I noticed aboard the ship, there was a Protestant chapel and a Catholic chapel. And the men of the Jewish faith, which didn't consist of many, maybe 15, 18, aboard the ship, had no services whatsoever. So knowing Father Kelly, one day I said to him, is there any chance of going to a synagogue in Ireland? The next port we hit in Ireland, because at that time the ship was ferrying convoys to Europe. So he said, I'll see what I could do. Well, we came back to New York. We did a lot of firing practices. We went up to Maine, we fired our guns. And all this time, I was assigned to a repair crew. That anchored the ship. It anchored the ship, every place it went. And on our way back to Ireland, not knowing that we were going for the last time, the chaplain called me and said to me, I worked out a weekend. You will be in charge. And I said, I shouldn't be in charge. I'm just a seaman. So he said to me, no, I trust you. You'll be in charge. So I became in charge of a group of about 15 to 18 sailors who were aboard the ship. And so we went to this was Northern Ireland. I met this shamus on the ship, on the citizen synagogue, who told me food was very difficult. And most of the people were in the British Navy or Army, and there was very little services. So I thanked him, went back to the ship, reported to Father Kelly, who informed me, he says, well, you still got liberty. You can go. I arranged a tour of the castles of Northern Ireland, of the fellas. So we were ashore having lunch, just ready to go on a trip. And this was like June 4th. And a whaleboat came alongside, looking for me. So I said, I learned one thing, never to volunteer. Don't give any information out where you don't have to. And listen before you speak. And so I said, what do you want Harry Rosenfeld for? He says, well, the captain of Nevada has a message for him. When I heard that, I knew it was serious. So I said, what's the message? He says, gather your men, come into the whaleboat, and come back to the ship as soon as possible. So I gathered everyone together. We went onto the ship, and as soon as we came on, they upped the gangplank, which is the ladder on the ship, and the loudspeaker roared, we're off to invade France. Well, we sailed down the Irish Sea toward France. It was between England and Ireland. And on the way down, on the way down anyway. Before that, we were in Scotland doing firing practices, and the ship got beached. And they couldn't figure out why the ship got beached, because, number one, they had maps, but the maps were incorrect. And so they tried to tow us off, and finally an aircraft carrier towed us off the ship, towed us off the beach, the sandy part. Well, going down into the invasion of France, I was topside, and you could see everything, what was going on. And the closer we got, we saw planes going overhead. It was like the 4th of July. And they postponed it a day, so we waited at night, one night, waited a day, and the next day we continued in. We ended up at Utah Beach, about a quarter mile from the beach. And I anchored the ship right there. The guns were firing like crazy, and the Germans were firing. Well, it didn't bother me at the time. You know, if I felt if my number was up, it would be up. But what bothered me was the invasion forces, the combat troops on the beach. When they got injured in the water or dead, their bodies floated by the ship. And when I saw that, I couldn't believe it. Anyway, we stayed there about 3 to 4 days, ran out of ammunition, went back to England, got more ammunition. We did a lot of damage to the Germans. And on the way back, we went to Omaha Beach. And we stayed there till probably the 20th of June or the 22nd of June, went back to England. And then we were informed that we had to go to Cherbourg. The Germans had 15-inch guns there, which outranked our 14-inch guns. They could shoot more, about 10 miles further than we could shoot. And we devastated the guns there. Took about 2-3 days. And then we left back to England again. And they informed us that to go to the Mediterranean. We then went to the Atlantic Ocean, through the Gibraltar, into the northern part of Africa. There we stayed at Oran, Casablanca, Algiers, Morocco. We had liberty in all these ports. And then we went to Italy. In Italy, we stayed at a naval base, the Italian naval base, for about a month. And at the end of August, we were informed that we were needed for the invasion of southern France, which we went. After about 2 or 3 days of the invasion, they informed us that they didn't need us anymore to go to Corsica. So we went to Corsica, we lay there for a day or two, and then said, okay, the invasion is not doing too good in southern France. Go to Marseille. The Germans took the 15-inch guns off the French battleships, installed it on land, and used it to help the German army so that the Marseille wouldn't be captured. Well, we stayed there, used the French battleship as a decoy. The American destroyers laid down smoke screens. And again, when we left there after 2 days, there was no more German guns. We then went back to North Africa. We were then informed that we can go home. So we went back to the United States. And this is like, we started out at the end of August. In September, as we were crossing the Atlantic Ocean, a hurricane or a typhoon came along. And so instead of going to Norfolk, Virginia, where we were headed, they headed to New York. New York was a beautiful port. Every sailor aboard ship was happy. They were home. No one got killed. They were all intact. We were very lucky. Shrapnel was flying all over the ship. They were really lucky. We stayed in New York about a week, 10 days, and we left for Norfolk, Virginia to be refitted for the Pacific Ocean. Well, everyone had liberty, and when liberty was over, it was sailed out like the end of November, beginning of December. We left through the Panama Canal for Long Beach, California. When we got there, we stayed a week, traveled to Hawaii, received liberty there, and then on our way to the South Pacific. We passed the Japanese islands that the U.S. forces overstepped. They didn't have to capture it because it didn't mean anything. They would lose too many men. And so we ended up in the Caroline Island, or the Solomon Islands, in an island called Magmag, which ended up as the Navy base for the South Pacific Fleet. There we stayed about a month, and then we got orders to go to Iwo Jima. We went to Iwo Jima, and again, we were about a quarter mile offshore, the capital ship there. The entire island was surrounded by Navy ships, and each one was firing into the island. They fired, and you could see the Japs were running from cave to cave. And the 40-millimeter crew, which we had 4 40-millimeter guns on the ship, good positions, were shooting at the Japs entering their caves and taking bets how many they could kill. You know, it was like a crapshoot. You know, just you're picking up. You go into a circus and you're shooting, and the guns were firing on the ship. We had 2 airplanes aboard the ship. The airplanes were used as spotters all through the war. And when we were over Iwo Jima, the pilot, the captain of the Navy Air Force aboard the ship, was killed. And so we were missing one airplane. And on our way back from Iwo Jima, the generator caught on fire, which was my department aboard the ship. Just like recently you heard the ship at sea, they couldn't use anything at. The same thing happened aboard my ship. And it was, the generators consisted of 2 DC generators. I forget. And there may have been 4, but they were cleaned and maintained. One happened to catch on fire. And in the Navy, I never realized it, but they have an NCIS, which is on television. And so they came down to blame somebody. And so they shopped it around and they came to my first class electrician who was in charge, name only. They wanted to hang him. So they came to me and they said to me, he's at fault. So I said, he's not at fault. The officer was at fault of our division. So they said, why? And I told them that supplies for the cleaning the generator couldn't be gotten because the officer didn't want to get him. So he was transferred out. The next officer that came in on top came and said to me, which is in the report, I'm going to watch you. So I said, do me a favor, watch me all the time. So, but we became good buddies. And one night he was very hungry. He came to me and he said to me, have you got something to me to eat? I said, yes, if you take my watch, I'll get something to eat for you. And so I did. And so it became very smooth. We went to Okinawa after that, and the ship got hit by I'm missing the point. Before we went to Okinawa, the ship was hit by a kamikaze, in which about 10 or 12 people died, and the guns on the ship were damaged. So we had to go back to Pearl Harbor and get new guns. So that meant more rest and recreation. And so when the guns were put on the ship, we went back. And so there we went to go into Okinawa and the North China Seas. So we bombarded Okinawa, and lo and behold, out of nowhere, a Japanese battery fired a shell, and it hit the ship. It hit the ship, and it came through the steels of the ship, and it hit the deck, which was a 12-inch steel deck, and I was standing underneath. And it made an elbow, and it came on, it went through and killed some sailors on the other side. Well, at this time we were used to, this is wartime. And people get killed, yet you bury them at sea. So we buried the individuals at sea. And then we went to Mogmog again. And then we went back up to Okinawa, fired. The invasion of Okinawa took place. When that was over, we went back to the North China Seas with the minesweepers, protecting the minesweepers. And the Japanese Navy, whatever they had, came out, and they were taken care of. At this time, they decided that they're going to invade Japan. So all the ships, especially our ship, we went back to the Philippines, had recreation for 2 weeks, and then the war ended. It was August 16th. We were in the Philippines. The war ended. So what we were to do, we went back to Okinawa, took a lot of soldiers and sailors from Okinawa on the ship and took them back to the United States. So we had a ferry service up and back. On the second trip back, I was informed that my service more or less was ended. And why was it ended? Because each individual had points. Every battle had a point. So when it came to the end of August 1945, I was short about 4 points. And so in September, they said to me, "You're going to leave the ship, but we need you aboard the ship." So I said, "In what capacity do you need me aboard the ship?" He says, "We'll promote you to a chief electrician if you stay aboard." I said, "Why?" So he said, "Well, we need someone your experience. The ship is going to Bikini Atoll. It's going to be used as a target ship, and we need someone to help take the ship there. So you'll be one of the skeleton crews." At this point, I had it up to here. I decided I'm going back to home, since my two brothers weren't home. They were in the service, and so I figured I'd be the first one. And so I wanted to go to college, which I did. And so I went home, I looked for a college, finally got into LIU, and that's the end of the story.
Okay. Okay. How long were you there?
It's very hard for me because whenever I think of the war, I think of the dead going by the ship. And that's what bothers me. Okay, shoot.
So were you there for the raising of the flag at Iwo Jima?
No, but I saw the flag go up twice. First time it was up, it came down. I was wondering why it came down. Then it went up again. Then I later discovered that they wanted to take a picture of it. So if I was there next to them, no, I wasn't. I was maybe about a half a mile away on the ship looking up. Because my ship was at the base of Mount Zurabaki, and the ships would come in. Well, I forgot to tell you that one of the LCIs came in with troops. They stopped at our ship for some orders, and we had the admiral aboard our ship. And as he approached the beach, when he came back from shore, 50% of his crew was demolished, dead. And a lot of them were wounded. So he came aboard my ship. My ship had 3 doctors, a very good surgeon named Bear, I believe. And he put them both together and sent them to a hospital ship. So Iwo Jima was easy on the Navy, but difficult for those who went ashore. No matter what you did, they had so many caves. No matter what bombardment they did, they bombarded the airfield, the caves, the men, everything. It wasn't a big island. And that was Iwo Jima.
And how did it feel to see the flag up for the second time?
Good. It felt good because you knew it was your island again.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. That's great. Now, when you were away, how did you stay in touch with your family?
By mail.
Okay.
Always wrote. About 10 years ago, I wrote a letter to my brother. He kept it. Where it is now, I don't know. But I have here letters that the Navy gave us that we could use, to send. I guess, and it tells about the history of the ship, where it was, everything else. I have a picture of the ship. And this is where the ship went. This is all the ports. Yeah. And I got some pictures, the highlights during the war. Okay? Some of this was taken. I also have a book. This is like when you graduate high school. And this came after the war, with everyone's picture in it. Not the names, but pictures of where you were. And like I said, this all comes. It comes from here, where the ship was. And it's It's a big book about the islands and everything. And I also bought a log book of where the ship, what the ship did, which I have upstairs.
Like a personal diary?
Yeah. I have a personal diary too. That's how I made all this up.
Yeah.
I used a personal diary plus the information I got from both, plus some individual escapades. Yeah.
So what were the living conditions like? Were you?
It was like he had a room. Well, let me say this. The ship was about 700 feet long and about 90 feet wide. It was about 30 tons of steel, solid steel. In Pearl Harbor, the ship was beached. They took it off, demolished the entire superstructure of the ship, and put a new superstructure on it. Now, the sleeping accommodations were probably the same as before. You had a large room. You had a mattress which was like 2 or 3 inches thick on springs, and it was 4 or 5 feet high, 4 or 5 feet bunks in a row, and I would say the room held 150, 200 sailors, and each had a locker in it too. So you can imagine, okay? When the shell came through from the Japanese artillery, the tip of the shell hit where the living quarters I was in, but it exploded in the compartment below, killing the individuals there. Okay.
Did you see any entertainment? Did you see any UFO shows?
Oh, yeah, you have it. USO shows. This in the Mediterranean we saw. This is the Army, which prior to service I was a musician, and I had a scholarship playing the clarinet. And at that time, I was thinking of it. But when I went into service, I decided not to be a musician. Now, in the Mediterranean Sea, this is the Army came aboard, and to my surprise, my clarinet teacher, who I got a scholarship from, was leading the orchestra and the whole band and the whole stage play. So I talked to him. In the Pacific, we saw the Bob Crosby show. He came aboard, plus a few more shows that came on. In Mogmog, they went from one ship to another. And even in Mogmog, it was a Navy base, but there was a Japanese island about 60, 100 miles away who always sent a plane over to bomb the Navy. And when I was there, they put a bomb right out an aircraft carrier. And I could never figure out why they didn't take out the airfield on that island called Yap. And that's the way it was. Either they were either too lazy or they didn't think too much of it.
Do you recall any humorous events or pranks that others would play on each other? Or was it all business?
It was mostly business. As far as pranks, there may have been a few, but incidental, really. Yeah.
So you were telling me a little bit about after the war. So did you go on to college?
Yes.
And what was your major?
I started off majoring in insurance and real estate. When I took Accounting 101, I became an accountant.
Yeah.
And then later on, I became a CPA. And I've been retired for 20 years. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to add that we haven't covered today?
When you talk about pranks, well, I'll tell you about one story. In the town of Morocco, myself and 2 other individuals went on liberty. And one of the fellows I was with showed movies on the ship. So he's always had movies to transfer and swap. And so going over one day, he took some movies over, and he dropped them off. And instead of getting a new one, he said, "We'll get one later." And so as we walked away, he said to me, "I got a bed sheet wrapped around my stomach." So I said, what are you doing with a bed sheet wrapped around your stomach? I said, we're going to sell it. I said, you can't sell it. It's against the law. It's against regulations. So he said, who's going to know? So I said, he says, Harry, he says, how do we plan this? So I said, fine. If you listen to me, we'll plan it. So I put one in the front of the market, one place in the market, and the other. I held up the sheet and I sold it. And the proceeds, we all got drunk. And when I went back to the ship, I was dancing and singing.
Yeah.
But I learned one thing: never get drunk on wine.
Yeah.
Okay.
We went back to Normandy 10 years ago.
Yeah, we did go back. Yeah, went back to Normandy.
Thank you for your time today, Mr. Rosenfeld. I really appreciate hearing everything.
You're welcome.
It's wonderful to hear all those stories, and I think this interview will be very valuable for our nation's history.
Well, let me say this. I see in history repeating itself, and that's what bothers me. We fought a war, and the kids don't realize it, at least the younger generation, that if we lost the war, half of them would be speaking German, and the other half would be dead. They wouldn't be alive. So I feel that we have to get it to the people, the Vietnamese, the Vietnam people. The war is pretty rough. You got to put yourself in somebody else's shoes before you can talk about it. And it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I think he did better than I thought he would.
Mm-hmm.